In 9 days' time, my next guest, Jeremy Bernard Corbyn, who turned 68 on Friday, is hoping to become this country's 7th Labour Prime Minister. In the run-up to polling day, we've invited party leaders onto Woman's Hour to tell us more about themselves and why we should consider giving them our vote. Good morning, Mr. Corbyn.
Good morning.
Welcome back to Woman's Hour. The last time we met,
lovely to be here.
You were trying to become the Labour leader for the first time. You were launching a women's manifesto. None of this time, I note, and no pink buses on this general election like Ed Miliband's campaign.
No, we have a red bus.
Red bus, no pink buses.
For the many, not the few, emblazoned all over it.
Well, you probably want
decoratively done, I must say.
You probably want to talk about childcare. Your party's announced this morning more details about extending 30 hours of free childcare a week to all 2 to 4-year-olds, which apparently would benefit 1.3 million extra children. I wanted to know why you wanted to do that as you were coming on Woman's Hour, and later you've got a conversation going with Mumsnet users. Isn't this an issue that affects everyone? It's not just a women's issue.
Of course it's not just a women's issue. It affects the whole community, excuse me, and it affects all of our children, and it's there in the manifesto and quite clearly set out, because at the moment we have a patchwork of preschool opportunities, childcare, which means that some children don't get very much opportunity, some get more. What we want is a universal offer of 30 hours per week.
The women's vote's largely a myth. We actually know from polling that the economy tops both men and women's top issues, what concerns them when they go there. Let me understand then, how much will it cost to provide unmeans-tested childcare for 1.3 million children?
It will cost... It will obviously cost a lot to do so. We accept that.
I presume you have the figures.
Yes, I do. It does cost a lot to do it. The point I'm trying to make is that we're making it universal so that we are in a position to make sure that every child gets it, and those that can at the moment get free places will continue to get them. Those that have to pay won't, and we'll collect the money through taxation, mainly through corporate taxation.
So how much will it cost?
I'll give you the figure in a moment.
You don't know it? You're logging into your iPad here. You've announced a major policy and you don't know how much it'll cost?
Can I give you the exact figure in a moment?
Is this not exactly the issue with people and the Labour Party, which came up under Gordon Brown, that we cannot trust you with our money?
Not at all.
You don't know the figure.
All of our manifesto is fully costed and examined.
But you're holding a manifesto, you're flicking through it, you've got an iPad there, you've had a phone call while we're in here, and you don't know how much it's going to cost.
Can we come back to that in a moment?
What, when you've looked it up?
Well, look...
My point is, it's quite troubling. This is a policy you're launching today, Mr. Corbyn, and you don't know how much it's going to cost. It hardly inspires the voters.
I think what is important for the voters to understand is that if we don't invest in our children and we don't invest in them for the future, then they do less well in primary school, less well in secondary school, and less well in the future.
But you don't know the cost.
I want to give you an accurate figure.
Why on earth are you giving free childcare to people who can afford it if it's unmeans tested? You don't have the figure. Hopefully somebody's emailing it to you.
The important thing is that all children get a chance to grow up together. At the moment we have a system which separates out, in the sense that a child of wealthy parents may well be able to go to a paid-for preschool or nursery facility. Others will not get that chance because their parents can't afford it, or if they're poorer will get a free place.
This is a very expensive policy, Mr. Corbyn. I'm going to help you out with the figures. I've got them. Would you like to hear how much it's going to cost?
What we think is that it's more important to invest for the whole community and collect the money back through taxation on the principle of universalism.
So it's all coming from taxation.
Which the same applies with National Health Service and applies with mainstream education.
It's a staggering cost. Would you like to know how much your policy is going to cost, Mr. Corbyn?
What is your estimate of it?
Well, it's actually Angela Rayner, your shadow education secretary. 2.7 billion and then 4.8 billion plus that, with £500 million to reverse the cuts to the Sure Start scheme. Does that sound about right?
It does sound correct, and the importance of restoring Sure Start is that this Conservative government has actually cut a lot of Sure Start centres and closed a lot of them down,
Yes.
and that has
got
damaged the chances of a lot of children.
We've now got to be in a situation, haven't we, Mr. Corbyn, where we trust you with our money, and you didn't know those figures there, and the next 9 days are about convincing people you're up to the job, the biggest job in the land, apart from your questionable links with the IRA and Hamas, which people have been over. Sorry, if I could just finish. You've never held a ministerial role, a shadow cabinet role, or even chaired a select committee. And before politics, you never ran a big organisation. And if I may remind the listeners, Harry Fletcher, who was a former key advisor of yours who left your campaign, recently said, you struggle to cope with the demands of frontline politics. Your office is ruled by chaos. There's no diary. There's tens of thousands of unopened emails. Your team is overwhelmed and they're frightened to make decisions. And just sitting before
by the
me
way,
here,
Harry Fletcher was never an advisor. He was
he worked for John McDonnell, and he worked in your close inner
volunteer
team.
in my campaign.
But the point is, he worked in your inner sanctum. And what I wanted to say to you is, I didn't expect you not to know how much your policy was going to cost.
We have a manifesto here which is about challenging the direction in which this country has gone, in that we've now had 7 years of continuous cuts in public expenditure, which has hit local government the hardest, but also hit obviously health and education as well. And we have also a process by which corporation tax is being reduced continuously, now down to 18% and proposed to go further. And we have underfunded public services and a growing gap between the richest and the poorest in our society. What we're suggesting is that we raise corporation tax to a slightly lower level than it was in 2010 in order to pay for the refunding of health, pay for the refunding of social care, and also
I'm very happy you brought up social care. Mm-hmm. I mean, it doesn't really answer my question on whether people may like your policies, but how can they believe you're qualified and up to the job if you don't know the figures on a key bit of policy there? And you haven't had this experience. Your office is run chaotically.
Well, I beg your pardon, my office is not run chaotically at all. We have put together in 2 weeks, because the election was obviously unexpected, a comprehensive manifesto. We have an economic strategy which is fundamentally about investment in our economy for the future.
You brought up social care, another big election battleground. You plan to increase spending on social care and introduce a national care service, as well as limit how much people pay towards their personal costs. But you haven't set out, again, how you would fund it. You talk of cross-party consensuses, wealth taxes, employer contributions, or a new social care levy. That's quite a range of suggestions. How would you pay, Mr. Corbyn, for your social care promises?
We would put in $2 billion per year straight away in order to cover the gap, the funding gap that's there at the moment. There's about 1 million people who don't get social care. And we wouldn't put a figure on it such as the Conservatives have of taking away property value. What we would say is we would fund that now and then come to an agreement on how we do long-term funding of social care.
So
The principle has to be that we'll put the money in immediately to deal with the crisis and then make sure we have a principled long-term strategy to ensure that social care is universally available. At the moment, it's a very patchy system. Some local authorities do it better than others. Some people have to give up work, nearly always women, in order to care for those who are not getting the care that they ought to be offered by the public.
So it's not costed?
I've said with $2 billion we'll put it in straight away.
But the rest of it, a principal long-term plan, is
$2 billion
uncosted.
per year would go in now in order to cover the immediate crisis.
But the rest of it is uncosted.
There have been huge cuts made in social care in the last 7 years, and that has resulted in these 1 million people. And it also, of course, impacts on health expenditure because of people stuck in hospital when they ought to be able to leave.
But the rest of it is uncosted. Let's move to another area of financial concern. The campaign to tackle inequalities in the state pension for women born in the 50s, hit by increases in pension age, wants a bridging pension and compensation for losses for those women qualifying later. You said you'd give pension credits to help some of these women. What you've said in your manifesto is that Labour, I quote, is exploring options for further transitional protections. Why not make a manifesto commitment, Mr. Corbyn, to compensate these women and spell out what transitional protection you're talking about.
We said we'd put in 800 million now to ensure they get pension credit, which would go some degree towards compensating what they've suffered, and then make sure that they don't lose out because of the way in which the pension age was raised without them expecting it or planning for it. So this cohort of women have suffered very badly, actually.
But why not make that manifesto commitment to compensate them? You said you're just going to see what else you can do.
What we said
pension credit won't go that whole way.
What we said is we'd put pension credit in now, and then we would look at a way of compensating them for it.
But why no manifesto commitment?
There's a manifesto commitment to make sure that they don't lose out.
You're satisfied that's enough at this stage?
I wish we'd had more time to get this further discussions on it, but that is the principle. The principle is the WASPI women have been extremely badly treated, and we believe they should be compensated.
Well, they're not going to get full compensation under you, Mr. Corbyn. Let's go to another area of financial concern, social concern, the definitive issue, some would say, of this election, Brexit, negotiating our exit from the EU. Many people who've analysed your manifesto may struggle to differentiate between Labour's position and the Conservatives. We'll leave that to one side for a minute. People can read that book that you've got in front of you. But Theresa May has said very clearly she will walk away. She is prepared to walk away with no deal. Would you leave those negotiations with no deal?
It seems a strange way to start negotiations by saying, if you don't agree with me, I'm going to walk away. There's therefore very little incentive on the other side to want to come to an agreement if you're going to walk off. I think we have to approach the Brexit negotiations on a number of principles. Firstly, accepting the result of the referendum that we're leaving the European Union. Next, guaranteeing EU nationals' rights of permanent residence in Britain, because many have families here or the families in Europe, and I think they need to have that certainty. Thirdly, the key part is tariff-free trade access to the European market.
Those are the things you're asking for, but I'm asking something separate. Would you be willing to walk away with no deal? I understand you're saying it's an odd position for Theresa May to start on, but it is a fair question to ask you.
We will negotiate to get a deal.
Okay, so you won't walk away without a deal?
No, you don't walk away, you stay at the table to get a deal.
But haven't you revealed your best hand? Because if those negotiating know you will do a deal at any cost, you're going in on the back foot, surely?
Absolutely not. It's the other way around. You're going in by saying that you want to continue a good trading relationship.
That's what Theresa May is saying.
Wait a minute. A good trading relationship with Europe. You need to make sure that those manufacturing jobs that are so reliant on trade with Europe are there. And you need to make sure that European nationals have guaranteed rights here. But also, we're not...
So you're willing to do a deal at any cost?
We're not threatening, which is what Theresa May is doing, to set this country up as a sort of low corporate tax haven on the shores of Europe.
Yes,
what we're saying is there has to be an economic relationship with Europe in the future.
But what you're saying is there has to be a deal at any cost.
There's going to have to be an agreement, whoever is in government, and we will make sure that the principle behind it is tariff-free trade access to the European market in order to defend jobs here, but also to maintain other links such as university, education and health.
But going to the poker table of Brussels, what's your cash-out point? Is it 100 billion?
We are going to the negotiating table in Brussels with a mandate to say two things: that Britain
you've said that already.
Britain has voted to leave the European Union, obviously,
well, they know that.
And that we have fought an election on the basis that we want to achieve a trade agreement with the European Union. I would have thought that's a good, sensible starting point.
It's where everybody would start.
It's also in the interests of countries in Europe that they have that trade agreement as well.
Do you have a cash-out point?
I'm not going to give any cash-out point.
Labour's made a manifesto pledge to renew Trident. Your lack of a personal commitment to Trident as a deterrent is a tricky one for voters. Who do they believe? Campaigning Jeremy Corbyn, who's put aside some of his key beliefs for the manifesto, or the man once he gets power?
The manifesto is a product of the policies of the Labour Party. The Labour Party has debated this issue for a very long time. I did, it's on the record, vote against the renewal of Trident. I was not successful in that, and the party has come to that conclusion. Therefore, the commitment is there in the manifesto. Where we are agreed, and what I will absolutely give a huge priority to, is recognising that any nuclear weapon ever used anywhere in the world is catastrophic for the entire planet. I've spent my life working with the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in order to bring about a nuclear-free world, and I will put as much effort as I possibly can into bringing about the reality of a nuclear-free world. I think,
according to the CND, the Campaign for the Nuclear Disarmament, you're still its vice president. According to its website.
I'm a member of CND. I don't think I'm a vice president of it. I'm surprised it's there.
You don't think you're the vice president
of
CND?
I'm surprised it's on the website because I resigned from those positions when I became a leader of the party.
So you're no longer the president of vice president of CND. Okay. In terms of then talking about...
But I do think, if I may say so...
The integrity point, that's what I'm getting at. Do people...
Well, can I finish on what I was saying?
Can people trust you on that?
I think people will recognise that this manifesto has been produced by a party, a very large Labour Party membership, which has put forward a transformational set of policies for Britain. I'm very proud to lead the party. I'm proud to accept the democracy of the Labour Party as well. That is what elected me to office in the first place, and it means that party members and supporters and affiliates can put forward policy ideas, some of which are more agreeable to each other than others. But the point is, to be successful in politics, you have to bring people together. You
talk about this transformational set of policies. It's well known, despite its many pledges regarding gender equality, that the Labour Party has still never elected a woman. That's not your fault. But let me ask you this. It's a simple question we're asking each party leader here at Women's Hour. What single policy do you consider vital to introduce to improve the lives of women? If you had to pick one policy.
Big investment in early years education and our education strategy in schools.
So linking women to children in that respect? Women as mothers?
No, linking girls to educational opportunities. And beyond that, it's about encouraging girls to go into science and engineering as well as all the other subjects. Indeed, this is something my mother taught me very robustly. She was a science teacher, about the importance of girls and the skills of girls in doing engineering and physics and science subjects. I think it's saying to girls that you can actually do anything and getting that message across. But it's also about how we deal with structures, about gender pay inequality, and about appointments. And I've made sure that the shadow cabinet I've appointed has more than half women members in it, and we've selected a very large number of women candidates. In fact, there were more women MPs in the last Parliament from Labour than the other parties put together.
And yet only 10 months ago, 45 of your female Labour MPs wrote to you saying that you had to do more to prevent the disgusting and totally unacceptable abuse that had come their way, done in your name by your supporters. They accused you of an inadequate response. Angela Eagle, who also ran to be Labour leader, said that you contributed to a permissive environment for abusive behaviour to flourish. Why didn't you do more?
I did everything, and I do everything I possibly can. Abuse of any sort is totally and absolutely unacceptable. I met Angela and all of the women Labour MPs to discuss this issue, pointed out what our policies were, pointed out what the procedures in the party were, and that nobody did any of that in my name because I would never do it myself.
You can't say they didn't do it in your name.
They absolutely didn't do it in my name.
Well, they said they did. They were your supporters.
They absolutely did not do it in my name because it was made very clear that any degree of abuse of any sort is unacceptable.
Did you meet with any of the people doing the abuse?
I got in touch with anyone that was involved in campaigning work to say that this is completely unacceptable and completely wrong, and it's also not within the rules of the Labour Party.
9 days away then from finding out if you get the top job in the country. I presume you will resign as leader of the Labour Party if you lose?
We're going to win the election. We're campaigning to win this election. We're gaining large numbers of supporters. We're gaining large numbers of activists.
Well, you would say that at this point.
Well, I would say that because it happens to be a reflection of what's happening.
But if you lose, I presume you'll resign.
I am very proud to lead this party, very proud to lead this party in this election. And you know what? I'm looking forward to winning this election.
But if you lose, would you resign?
I'm looking forward to winning the election.
We can't learn that. But the only reason I ask is one of your top men, Ian Lavery, hinted at an election rally on Sunday that your defeat would not spell the end of your leadership. He said the Corbyn project is only just beginning.
I was with Ian when he said that. His whole point was that when we've won the election, the whole issues of transformational politics doesn't go away. It's not shut up and disappear into Westminster. It's quite the opposite. It is about how people are more involved in a much more democratic society, how we properly fund education, how we invest in arts and culture in our society.
I'm running out of time here.
It was all of that.
But most people fall on their sword straight away. Ed Miliband did, John Major did. It's a cross-party response when people lose.
I'm proud to lead this party and I'm looking forward to winning the election.
Do you really want this?
Absolutely.
How much?
Absolutely. I want to do this. I want to do it for our party. I want to do it for the people of this country because I do believe we have to change direction.
Mr.
We
Corbyn,
cannot go on forever being a society based on inequality and poverty as well as great riches.
I have to stop. I have to go to the drama. This is what happens on Radio 4. Okay. Mr. Corbyn, thank you so much. We're continuing our drama now. Bindi Business starring Mira Sayal.
Thank you.